Welcome to this episode of The Meaning Mindset with Rabbi Ron. I am your host, Rabbi Ron Lipaz, and we are privileged to have a conversation today with Pastor Grace Park. Pastor Grace is a pastor at Pacific Palisades Presbyterian Church here in Southern California, and you'll see there's a lot to learn from this woman, and you're in for a wonderful conversation about life, about the stuff that matters, the stuff we're struggling with, religious thinking, inter-religious dialogue. There's a lot packed in this hour. Here we go. Pleasure to see you and to meet you in person.
Thank you.
It was nice that our wonderful friend Jim introduced us, and we texted and spoke, but not to have you in person across the table is wonderful. So
it's exciting.
Yeah, it is for me too. I want to ask you, I don't know anything about you and I know what I've read about you on the church's website.
All lies.
I know. If it's in print, it's got to be. How did you land in this line of work, this vocation?
That is a good question. And the only answer I could give you is it's the hand of God.
Okay. So
did not plan it at all.
That might be a piece of this?
Yeah, did not plan it at all. I went to seminary after I had done a little bit of business after college, and then I decided to teach underprivileged kids, and I was in Pacoima for a while teaching, and I was at a crossroads in my life, and I thought I'd like to either go into education or something else. And so I applied to return back to Berkeley for a graduate education program, and also simultaneously applied to go to Fuller Seminary.
Oh.
And I did not apply to seminary with the intention of becoming a minister, but simply to find out more about the Bible, to deepen my faith, to get all the questions that I had answered. Questions like, did Jonah really exist in the belly of a whale?
Yeah.
These questions that I had always had since I was a little kid. Yeah. And I ended up going to seminary. And it wasn't until my second year, people started saying to me, you should think about becoming a minister. And I was like, no, that's not what God intended for me. And here I am, 30 some odd years later. So whenever I'm asked that question, I have to answer truthfully, it was the hand of God.
You clearly had a relationship with God that preceded that.
I did. It took on different iterations, as I think for many of us as we walk through life, God takes on different identities for us, fills different slots in our lives, answers different questions. And so my life had seen who God was in a lot of different ways. And yes, but I grew up in a Christian family, and we attended church every single Sunday. That's what the Parks did. Mm-hmm. But as with a lot of young people, God took a backseat many times. God was not in the car many times. And then eventually God was at the steering wheel, for which I am thankful. So,
do you remember a period, which I remember in my own life, where not only did God take a back seat, but my belief, my faith, my understanding, my need, my conversation just was absent?
Absolutely. I think there would be something not wrong, but I think there's something unusual if we walk through the course of our life and God is always in the same place. Just like the sun moves around, or I am not into astronomy.
One of us do.
Right? There's an orbit.
Yeah,
just as we look at the sun and the moon, they're always at different places, right?
Yeah.
They also appear to us. The moon on some nights is huge and beautiful and yellow, different colors.
Vivid, actually.
Right?
Yeah,
and sometimes it appears to us as a small sliver of a fingernail in different shades and at different places. And even in the course of one evening, as we look up, The moon's in a different place.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way that God travels through our lives as well.
I love that. I also love the idea that sometimes the moon is actually invisible. And a child might say, there is no moon, and because he's looking at the sky and saying, prove it to me. And you go, it's there.
Well
it's
said.
just obscured by the earth.
Well said,
Something
Rabbi.
as large or as small as that. I love that. I wonder when ministry, we talk about being called, if we have that experience.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, I think somebody might say, I'm called to accountancy.
Well, absolutely.
I'm called to bricklaying.
Absolutely.
I feel like there's a purpose in my life.
Yes.
And some might seem to an audience to be more worthy than others.
Right.
I think all work is worthy of us,
Absolutely.
of the blessings that we have.
Yes.
Actually, I think about that a lot. The idea that people can be mowing lawns or painting houses or doing anything, and it's not the task, but what they bring to the task.
That is right. I
And
believe in that too.
another piece of it that I see is that it's often how they interact with other human beings. And I go, okay, it wasn't really about painting the fence.
That's
It was
right.
about the interaction with the homeowner or the worker or whomever it is while
Yes.
they're
Absolutely.
work.
I agree wholeheartedly with you. No matter what we are doing, there is a calling to it. And there is meaning and purpose in everything that we do, whether it is being a stay-at-home parent, whether it is being a teacher, whether it is being a basketball player. There, we can bring meaning to the table. It's all about what we bring. And every vocation is a calling. You and I don't have, we're always told you have a higher calling or you have a direct line to God. Everybody's got a bat channel to God. It's
Right.
whether or not we pick up that phone and we use it, right? So we have been called to a certain vocation.
Right. No greater or less than any other.
Correct. It's just a different role.
Yeah.
We believe that in the Presbyterian Church, we have different roles and different functions. As pastors, as ministers, we happen to serve a certain function. But the role, no matter what everybody has, the role is just as important, just as valuable, just as meaningful. Agree completely.
I don't know enough about certain denominations of Christianity, more about some, less about others. I know very little about the Presbyterian Church.
We'll learn together.
Yeah. Well, give me some insights into what makes it unique among the denominations.
So the Presbyterian Church, the word presbytero, it comes from the word elder, and it really actually denotes the way in which our polity or our government is run. And so we have a structure in the Presbyterian Church where elders basically represent the congregation. And I know for many synagogues, that's the way it works as well. You have a board of elders.
Right.
And they are chosen in a specific role to help the church, to help lead the church together with the pastor. And
So they have a formal role.
that is correct. That is correct.
Yeah, I said right because we certainly have a board, but the board can be anybody of any age. It's not unique to the wisdom of elders. Maybe it should be.
As it is with us as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who are the elders? What denotes an elder?
So they are elected from the congregation, and it's very much the way that the American government is. It is supposed to be democratic. It is supposed to be representative, and so that is the way that we kind of move forward in our church. So it's that, and there's also certain points of theology that makes us who we are as Presbyterian, and that's a whole nother episode.
You said something before. We've been talking about purpose-driven living and how the poorest and the richest, the mightiest and the meekest all have purpose.
Yes.
And again, I think I see that in people's lives. I often think that we don't see it in our own lives.
Correct.
That's kind of why we need each other.
Absolutely.
We need a lens that's different from ours.
Absolutely.
And I wonder about so many of the struggles that people have, and we're living in an age of what feels at least to be monumental struggle, personal, interpersonal. What's your sense of meaning in the struggle and meaning that gets us out of that entanglement, that nastiness, or that lack of self-worth?
I think it's important for all of us to remember that there is meaning in everything that we do, whether it is something that we found to be positive or negative. Also, there is meaning in, there's nothing neutral in life, right? It's going to impact you in some way. You are going to impact another person in some way. So there's very little neutrality, I think. So I think it's important for us to remember, you bring this concept of meaning. Everything that we do in our life has meaning to it. Mm-hmm. It has value and it has worth. And it's important for us to remember that we have all been created in the image of God. And God says that to us daily. God says to us, you have meaning to me. You have worth to me. You are worthy to me, no matter what you do. And so we have to take that and then take that into our lives. So every single encounter we have, whether it's meeting a receptionist at our doctor's office, what is that encounter going to be like? Is that person going to come away from that encounter thinking, oh, that was a nice, pleasant happening in my day? Whether it is you're going to a donut counter and you're interacting with the person that's giving you the donuts, how are you going to interact with that person? How will you bring meaning into that specific moment there? And I think if we remember that in everything that we do, no matter who we interact with, that can, at the end of the day, bring an overall meaning to what we have done that day, whether we have interacted with one or two people or 10,000 that day, right? So every single thing that we do can hold meaning. It's just, what meaning will it be?
So I agree with you 100%. I think I've been thinking about what you said about nothing is neutral. Nothing is neutral. I don't think there's any human endeavor or interaction that is neutral. It all has impact, consequence, because we're an audience to our lives and our thoughts, and the world is.
Yes.
So even alone, we're impacting.
Yes.
I always think as a singer also about my inner ear and my outer ear. So I remember when I started recording my voice, which was as a kid or a teenager, and it was cassette recorders.
Yes.
And we'd never believed that was our voice.
Correct.
It's always a shock, right? Or the answering machines that we used to have. You go, that's not me.
Correct. You don't sound the way that you think you sound.
And everybody else would hear you go, that's who you are.
Yes.
That's how you sound.
Yeah.
And that's what taught me that there is the me that I hear with my inner ear, which I might like or dislike, the sound of it, the thoughts as well, the ideas. And then there is the external ear, which is how you hear me.
Yes.
So we're living in that relationship as well, perceiving ourselves and being perceived. I remember an experience where I was in northern San Fernando Valley. I'd just done a particularly challenging funeral. I don't remember the circumstances, but I remember coming away just feeling like little sacks of weight on my shoulder that I needed to work through. And early in my work, and I went to a Baja Fresh. I thought I'm going to pick something up to eat and then go home or back to the synagogue. And I stood in a long line and I watched, there were maybe 3 counters, 3 lines. There was one woman, 20s, at the front, and I just kept being drawn to her because of the way she greeted people. Now, it isn't it's California, it's America, have a nice day smile, something that's performative.
Yeah.
It just felt like
it was coming
she wasn't a burrito salesman person. She was doing that. That was, in some ways, the least bit of the nourishment she was offering. I just watched. I stood back and watched male, female, old, young, to see if her interactions changed. And the quality that she brought to every new person was things we might describe like curiosity and compassion and non-judgmental curiosity and a sense of being present to who they were and the food that they wanted to eat. But it was a real lesson for me because, again, in my relative immaturity at the time, I was thinking, maybe I need to rethink this idea I have of more and less worthy vocations, things that matter more. Everything matters.
That's right.
Every human interaction matters.
That's right.
And you see that. It's just, sometimes when you witness it and you have that epiphany, it's powerful.
And how lovely for you to have witnessed something like that and to think all those years ago, that young woman at this Baja Fresh taught you a lesson that you now, in your middle age, still remember.
Definitely.
So she taught you something, and you will never see her again.
Right.
She doesn't know who you are.
Right.
And yet she taught you something in that moment, and you had a metanoia, an aha moment
Right.
that lasts with you. And so I think that is a perfect example of what we're talking about right now, that every single thing that we do counts. It matters. I've come away from interactions with people and I have just shook my head and I thought, oh, Grace, you could have just done that so much better. You just had a rewind button. You
Right.
could have done it so much better. And how regrettable is that when we have those moments where we come away and we think, I could have done that so much better.
Right.
Could have done it
Well,
differently.
you and I believe in apology and forgiveness and self-renewal.
Yeah.
And we have this
Second chances.
idea of our theology is grounded in this idea that we are imperfectly human.
Absolutely.
And that we get to rewrite those moments, not necessarily by editing. It's not the Hollywood rewrite.
Right.
It's not going back and let's reshoot that moment in our lives. But let's apologize if it's appropriate.
Right.
Let's make amends. Let's shift toward a better path.
Right.
For the next interaction.
Absolutely. And learning from that so that you can take the next step in a different way, in a different direction. Absolutely. And remembering also that that is the very essence of who our God is. The God of second chances,
Yeah.
the God of new beginnings, the God of hope, the God of putting the past in the past, the God that erases everything that is just a minute behind us. What an incredible God this is, that we can move forward knowing that we believe in this God of hope.
Yeah. What about the person who says, I'm lost or stuck? None of what you're saying matters because I don't believe in the God of anything. So I'm out of this conversation. You're not talking to me. What would you say rather than, well, let me just leave it at that? What would your answer be?
I really understand where that person's coming from. Because you look at our world today and you look at all the things that we're struggling with and you look at the mendacity of all these things that we're just bills and looking at walls that don't seem like they're going to move. I really get where that person's coming from. And I really believe, Rabbi, that when we have somebody that comes to us that believes that and feels that to the very core of who they are, that we need to sit with them and say, I hear you. Sometimes when we're in deep grief and we've experienced a sense of loss and we don't have hope, there is nothing that anybody can say that's going to make us feel better.
Right.
There really isn't. And the only thing that we can do with that person is to be there.
Yeah. Walk with them.
And walk with them or not walk with them. Sit in that pit with them and say, I'm here.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to make you feel better, but I'm here with you.
Yeah. I had an experience of that was shifting for me years ago, really early in my work. And I was going to the first mourning house, the first house of mourning, to meet a family who had just suffered a loss. And then I was going to sit with them and do whatever I would do. And I say that do whatever I would do because I sat in my car wondering what I needed to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've had that, especially early on. You go,
oh, all the
what
time.
do I need to say, do, reference? What are they looking for in me? And it took me a few minutes of angst sitting in the car and thinking, what do they need me to say? Until I gave up on that.
Good.
And gave in to the notion of get out of the car,
Yep.
lock it, walk toward their door, ring the doorbell, and just be present. That's all I need.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's what we all need to remember, that sometimes we have to just get out of our own way.
Yeah.
And to really remember that God is going to fill us with whatever needs to be done. If we, once again, can trust in that process and to get out of our own way and to realize that there will be a provision. And that, I think, is the crux of what faith is. That is what faith is. It's believing in something that intangible, we can't touch.
And it sounds like you're saying faith isn't in an entity. I mean, it is as well, but the core of faith is in resource.
Oh, that's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
Does that ring true?
I'll have to think about that for a little bit. That's really interesting. I personally, I have a hard time when people try to put God in some kind of a box, because God is so many different things. We'll never be able to understand the true mystery of who God is, and that's part of being human, and we have to be okay with that. But yeah, coming to a place where we understand what exactly does God mean for me here now in my own life, and also in this world. Where does God fit in? And I like that thought, Rabbi. I like that.
Just processing what you're saying and thinking about my own experiences. I think the notion of God's reliability, let's say, isn't that God will be there as an entity, as a figure. It's that God will be there as a mentor, counselor, comforter, strengthener, provider of provision. You will have what it'll take to make the next step, even though that next step right now seems impossible.
Absolutely. For us as Christians, we say the Lord's Prayer, this prayer that Jesus taught us. And one of the lines is, give us our daily bread. It likens back to when God provided for the Israelites in the desert.
Sure.
God did not give manna that was going to last a week. The Bible tells us that the manna came, and by evening, if anybody tried to store it, it was spoilt.
Right.
It was teaching the Israelites daily. God will daily provide for you. Don't worry about storing up for the next day. Be here in the moment, knowing that somehow God is going to provide for you. So
that's beautiful.
Right? We liken that. So we say this prayer and we say, what does it mean when we ask God to provide us for our daily bread? That means here, now, in the present, we're trusting that God is somehow, some way, going to provide.
Yeah.
We don't know how.
Even if we don't know what tomorrow holds, because none of us do.
That's right.
And even if we don't have it in our bank account, it's not the bread that's in the freezer.
That's right.
It's trusting empty freezer, it will be.
That's right.
I'll have the resources I need.
And it's the same with Elijah, with the widow.
Yeah.
The oil. How did it last? How was there oil? How was there enough flour to make the next loaf of bread? How does that work? That is God.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we believe. And that is the essence of our faith. We don't know, and yet we believe.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What would you say you've learned as not only as a minister, but as a woman, as a mom, wife, daughter, human being, about meaning in relation to the very personal stuff of your life, raising your kids, the struggles that come with that?
The older I get, I'm turning 59 this month. The older I get, the more I realize I know nothing.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah. The more I realize that all the things that I thought held meaning to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, hold very little meaning now. All these things that I thought weighed so heavy and were so important may not be so important. And that if I had just trusted a little bit more in letting go, the process of letting go, then I would have been a better mother to my kids in a lot of ways. I would have been a better wife. I would have been a better minister, instead of relying so much on my own stuff and my own abilities and my own strength and what I thought I knew. I could have injected a little bit more meaning into things if I had, ironically, let go of more things.
But you couldn't know then what you know now.
Yeah.
You couldn't have today's wisdom yesterday.
Right. What is that, the Monday morning quarterback
Exactly.
thing?
And I think especially where we're all amateurs parenting.
Yeah.
Right from the beginning, we're all looking at guides and asking people questions and going, am I doing it right, wrong?
Right.
At some point, we'll go, okay, I did. I think that, by the way, at some point we might say, I did well enough.
Exactly. And that is my husband's motto. There's such wisdom in the way that he looks at the world. And he says that to me when I'm moaning and groaning and wringing my hands and thinking, I should have done this, I should have done that. And he said, we did the best that we could with what we had.
Right.
God provided for us at that moment. And as you said.
And part of the provision was the brain, the wisdom, the heart, the relationship to do with it what we could do at the time.
Yep.
And that was imperfect.
Yep.
And yet what we teach our kids is, unfortunately, in many ways, perfection, perfection, perfection.
Yep.
And yet they're not seeing that in their parents.
Right.
You know, maybe the great humble lesson is look at us and realize that we stumble. I always think that's why we were given knees, because we have to get up again.
I like that.
Otherwise, we're down and stay down.
I like that.
And if so, then see that in the people closest to you.
Right.
Watch your parents stumble and inevitably fall many, many times.
And watch your parents get back up again.
Watch them get back up.
Right.
That's the hero's journey.
Absolutely.
The heroine's journey.
Yeah. And it's this understanding and wrapping our minds around saying that there is good and there is bad in every single thing. Yeah. There will be good and there will be bad in every meal that you partake in any movie that you go to, in any relationship that you are in. There will be good and there will be bad, and they coexist together, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's by design.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. What's inspiring you right now?
You are inspiring me right now.
That's mutual. Sincerely.
I love this conversation.
So do I. Thank you.
And I'm so thankful for it, because I really feel like people need to enter into conversations with each other. Look at this gift that we have, Rabbi. We get to sit here in this beautiful room talking about life.
Yeah, the stuff that matters.
When do people get to do this? But so then what I'm inspired by is then how are you and I going to take this out into the world?
Right.
How is our interaction today here in this room then going to inspire us to go out, and when we go to the coffee shop, how are we going to bring that joy and that metanoia and that understanding of hope and resilience and meaning in our lives? How are we going to take that out when we order our next cup of coffee, or when we see our friends the next time, or when we go...
Or when we deal with the next challenge in our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a great, interesting idea that fascinated me, and I'm not a numbers person.
Nor am I.
Okay, so I got that when you did this with the moon and the sun, I thought, okay, she and I speak the same language. Yeah. We know they exist, but how they work, I don't know.
I have no idea.
I'd say anybody should look this up. There have been estimates that each average American, they did this in America, not on a global scale, that every human being, in this case on this continent, will affect a certain number of people in their lifetime.
Oh,
now, I want to say it's about 80,000 people in a lifetime.
Wow.
And that is not the person who's living a public life.
That's just a regular
That's
Joe.
a regular woman at Baja Fresh, right?
Yeah.
That's every human life.
Yeah.
And then to me, that's on one hand daunting, intimidating.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, meaning I need to think about how I'm living and how do I possibly live up to that.
Right.
And the other is humbling.
Absolutely.
Okay, if people at that scale are going to be affected by my being, then I need to refine my being. I need to be careful with this instrument and how I use it.
Absolutely. I think that we all need to remember to carry around the proverbial mirror, the hand mirror, with us, and just remember that we're accountable for what we're saying and what we're doing and the spirit that we carry into places. And wow, 80,000 people. Yeah,
don't quote me, but it has an 8 in it.
That's that's a good number. But it is a tremendous responsibility.
It is, being human.
Right? It is. Being a human.
And it also, I think, it's not just the formal interactions that we're going to remember because we saw them in our calendar and you and I have this to remember.
Correct.
It's the informal one that I just had when I got my spinach feta wrap at Starbucks.
Exactly.
The woman behind the counter, the woman behind me in line.
Absolutely.
Who got to see how I interacted. And my wife who was standing with me and all of these little bumps against other humans.
The phone call that you get from the telemarketer. Are you going to say, Are you going to hang up? Are you going to say, thank you so much, you're doing a great job, but no, I'm not interested. I mean, every little thing you can make somebody. Have you ever called a customer service line and that person on the other end of the line is grouchy, clearly does not like their job?
Of course.
Versus a person who's like, oh, sure, I can help you with that.
I had this interaction the other day. I was dealing with an airline, Alaska, I'll say. It was great. And at the end of the call, I said to the woman, I said, can I give a survey? You know, she said, actually, if you don't mind. And at the end, there was a survey. What did you think of this interaction? Amazing. Would you recommend this airline on the basis of the interaction with that agent? Yes. And then finally it said, if you'd like to record a brief message. And I did. I said, this was a fantastic representation of your values. That's
so great. So you had a great interaction with her or him.
Yeah.
And in turn, you're giving her a gift.
An anonymous gift from across the planet.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
You'll never encounter this person again. And yet they made your day.
Yeah.
You're going to make their day. You're going to make management's day. I mean, it's so, the algorithm is so simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's so simple.
You know, I think about the infinity symbol, right? Which is so elegant and simple and beautiful. And what I think about is you and I are in that right now, right? It's this dance, this interplay of energy, exchange of values.
Yeah.
What we'll then describe as values that are infinite and constant. They're moving back and forth between two people. I also think in every kind of relationship that we're in that, I think maybe this is a good way to think about it. We're on a seesaw, right? And as far as I know, seesaws are still mechanical. Sure,
Fulcrum,
kids at some point
will
sit and with an app move it. But for now,
frightening. Yes.
For now, it relies on one little child to make an effort to elevate the next little child. And then she or he has the chance to do the same for them, back and forth and back and forth. And I think what we fail to recognize sometimes is when we're the one who got off and left the other person, with a sore butt, basically. Yeah, where we just said, hold on, I just got something and I didn't return it. I didn't make a point of being an elevating force in another human being's life.
Yeah, that is profound and deeply philosophical. And if you think about how many times that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, everybody.
And I don't know about you, Rabbi, but I don't ever want to be the person that gets up and leaves.
Yeah.
Right? I want to be responsible to the best of my ability to kind of keep that seesaw going. Right. Or just even being in the equation. Or when you need to leave the equation, to say it in a way that is not hurtful. Right?
There's a way to get off that seesaw that doesn't injure the other person.
Correct.
Yeah, you're
gracefully, and leaving that person with dignity, and treating that person, even in the goodbye, giving that person the dignity. So I think that is an incredible metaphor for life, good. Rabbi. I like that.
Good.
I like that.
You said gracefully. I'll ask you, Pastor Grace, where does grace come into this?
Oh, grace so I'll tell you the background to the way that I got my name. Everybody says, oh, it's wonderful. Your name is Grace and you're a chaplain and a minister. Your parents had foresight. My mom was a huge movie buff. Oh. Had I been born a boy, she would have named me Carrie after Cary Grant. I was a girl. I got Grace Kelly.
Oh, you got lucky.
So so my Korean name actually has meaning of also this sense of gracefulness and moving through life, with loyalty.
Beautiful.
So I'm so thankful for my name. But
what's your Korean name? Sorry.
It's Hyosuk.
Which means what would most literally? What would
well, I think that there's a dual meaning to it. There is grace in it, but there's also it means kind of a filial piety, a thankfulness to your parents. And
nice.
So it's very meaningful to me.
Yeah.
But personally, I can tell you that grace has been the hallmark of my life in terms of God's grace to me. I was truly a really lost kid growing up. Had a great life, blessed parent, and with parents and wonderful schooling and education, but just not sure where I was going to be in this world or what I was going to be doing on this planet. I had all these different ideas. And so I really hold tight to God's grace in my life and just what God has given me in my life. And I live every single day with gratitude for where I am and what I'm doing. And I'm driving here to meet you and I'm thinking, wow, I get to do this with Rabbi Ron today. I mean, what a gift.
Yeah,
seriously, like there are places that you never think that you would be in your life.
That's right.
Right here with you. Never thought that this would happen. And it is such a gift. So I look at every single thing in my life that I've gotten as God's grace. So it's very meaningful to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. My daughter's name is Hannah.
Oh, I have a Hannah too.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Kismet.
It is Kismet.
That's crazy.
So Hannah is grace also and graceful. So there's another connection.
And Hannah in the Old Testament, for us in the Bible, is the story of a woman who would not give up on God.
Hannah's just one of my favorite stories.
She's a heroine.
Yeah.
Total heroine.
The other thing I love about her in the story from 1 Samuel is how human she is, how vulnerable she is.
Yes.
How misunderstood she is.
Yeah.
There's just
how deeply she was living in grief. Every single day was a day without hope for her. Yeah. And yet every single day she got up and she prayed.
Yeah.
And she prayed and she prayed and she prayed. And she was faithful to her prayer as well. You know, and she just never gave up on God. This was a woman who had every single reason. She had no identity in her life because she was barren. And she did not give up on God's grace. She just continued to press God. Amazing testimony.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's also a very accessible story.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of people think biblical stories are some kind of literature they can't access.
Right.
I think read the story of Hannah, you go, oh, okay, that's me. That's
totally
somebody
relatable.
Like me.
Right.
That's every human being I know.
Absolutely.
You said that you were lost as a kid. So was I, by the way. And maybe that's part of why I am the grateful, happy person that I am.
Agreed. And maybe that's why we felt the calling that we did.
Oh, yeah, I think so too.
Absolutely. Just that God spoke hope into our life and meaning.
Right.
And then we feel called to, I mean, at least that's what I feel.
Yeah, I think I'm called to understanding, meaning conversation, to be in conversation with other people. Part of it is I'm an extrovert, so I do feed on human relationship. I don't, as much as I, especially these days, need after that kind of prayer experience, holiday service, whatever it is, to retreat and have some time to myself. I need that more and more. I also know that I'm fed by human interaction. I'm inspired by human stories. I had a few conversations recently that really inspired me. One was with a woman in her 90s. I think she was 94 or 95. And I called her and I said, how are you? She said, I'm great, Rabbi. How are you? I thought, okay, I've heard enough already, right? Yeah. Whatever I'm dealing with, she's 94, 95, she's great. And I said, what's going on? She said, well, I just had my birthday or about to have it, I don't remember. And she said, I said to each of my kids and grandkids, don't buy me presents. I'm going to tell you what I want from each of you.
Wow.
Now that's a strength, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Good
and
for
I
her.
said, what was it? She said, I want your time. And she said, my calendar is full for the next few weeks of birthday presents. I'm having a picnic with my granddaughter.
Lovely.
I'm having dinner with my son. I'm having this with that.
What wisdom.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And another man in his 90s that I had a lunch at a deli with near us here in Calabasas. I was sitting with him. He's in his 90s. And I asked him, because I did the funeral service for his late beloved wife some time ago. And I said, what's beautiful in life right now, even since the loss of his wife? And he said, I'm doing something I never did. He said, as the dad, I was always the one that when the kids would call, I'd say, oh, hi, I'll put your mom on. And I recognized that in myself also. And he said, I put mom on, and mom would hear the kid's story, what's going on in their lives, their days. And after her conversation, I would ask, so what's going on with him? And she'd say, oh, he's dealing with this, he's doing with that, he's doing with that at work. And he said, now I realize that she's not there to do that. I can't say, hold on, let me put mom on.
That's right.
And now what I'm doing is I'm golfing with 3 of my kids every week on the same day.
Wow.
I'm having dinner with one kid every week on the same day.
What a gift.
I'm having lunch or dinner with a grandchild every week. And he said, now I'm in that conversation. That feels like a privilege.
He's there. Yeah.
But isn't that amazing?
See, these folks who have lived longer than we have, they know what the meaning of life is. And that is to be present, it's not the stuff that we have. It's the way that we spend our time. And that is what brings meaning to whatever we do. And think of the incredible memories that he's giving each of his
Getting and
children.
giving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is the essence of what life is, right?
Yeah.
It's our lives are not these bodies.
Right.
These bodies are just shells.
The carriage.
Exactly. They're clothing that we shed. Who we are is our spirit. That is what we need to feed. That's what we need to feed. It is our spirit. Our spirit needs to be fed every single day in some way.
Yeah.
And that's what brings meaning to everything that we do.
And in most cases, I think, not all, that is in some kind of relationship.
Absolutely.
Now, it may be a relationship with the divine. It may be a relationship with a grandchild, a friend, a neighbor, a member of a community.
And here's the thing, Rabbi. The divine can be found in that relationship with the neighbor,
Definitely.
with the spouse, with the grandchild. The divine is found in every person, right? How are we seeing God? Are we seeing God through the trees, in the sound of the birds, in the sound of our grandchild's voice? That is part of the divine. That is the way that God comes to us, right? We just have to be aware and open and listening and watching, because the divine visits us in ways that we can't even imagine.
Yeah, and it's often not in houses of worship.
Yes, unfortunately, that is
I'm
true.
saying that. It's not a critique of what we do.
That's very true.
It's the reality that I think God is bigger than that.
Absolutely.
And if we believe in the divine in the relationship with the other human being, which I certainly do, and it's part of a core Jewish belief as well, then it's not just going to happen in formal moments and formal places.
Correct.
It does happen at Baja Fresh.
That's right.
Our
Or
sponsors, I
it
hope.
might not happen. It might not happen through a sermon.
Right.
Right? It's, it could be happening in the cantor's voice or in the choir's voice or whatever. And that is how God comes to us.
So
Absolutely.
I feel like if we are effective, you and I, in what we are aiming to do, to some degree, it's not to turn our heads toward the heavens. It's to, or I should say, let me say that differently. If we're effective in what we're doing, it's to turn people toward each other.
Absolutely.
Right, through our words, through our lives, through the example of what we're trying to do, to say, don't stare up here for long. You've got 10 minutes with me up here or an hour, but then do this and find each other.
Absolutely.
And find service to each other and relationship with each other and elevate each other.
Right. You asked very good questions, so I have a question for you.
Please.
So for a person who is listening to what you just said right now, what would you say to that person if they say, oh, I get that you're asking me to turn to another person or develop relationships, but I'm an introvert. I'm super shy, or I'm socially awkward, or I don't know how do we speak to those people?
It's such a good question. And it's a great question because it's not really abstract. We're dealing with all different kinds of human beings in our lives.
Right.
And I have to be careful not to assume that another person interacts the way that I'm comfortable interacting.
Right.
And eye contact is easy for me. Yeah. In fact, I prefer eye contact. That's how I find connection.
As do I.
And another person will say, it's the most comfortable moment in a conversation. And maybe it's to say to everybody, sometimes being present is in silence. And sometimes a phase of presence is with occasional sporadic eye contact. And sometimes it's doing something for somebody without eye contact. That's okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just stepping across the threshold, which might be into the room or out into the world. It always involves a level of vulnerability. Maybe that's at the heart of it, which is being willing to be vulnerable, which means uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I'm a big fan of good discomfort. And it's also willing to trust.
Yeah.
There's that faith piece.
Yeah.
That you'll be okay in this.
Yeah.
That you'll be safe.
Yeah.
That you won't necessarily be immediately understood.
Right.
But that's not really the aim. The aim is to show up.
Yeah. And we can show up in different ways.
Yeah.
For people who are, have a really difficult time getting out there socially, sometimes, even reaching out through a text or an email or something, that's the way that they make a connection if they can't.
For sure.
They can't, right? So it's kind of, we just recently rescued a dog from Korea who was headed for the meat market, and we were really excited to welcome her into our family. But she had been so traumatized, and she's still, we've had her for a year now, and she's still a little bit traumatized. And I noticed with her that eye contact scares her. Right? So for me, you and I, we love eye contact because that's the way that we can really make this connection. For some people, eye contact may feel a little threatening or intimidating.
Yeah. The dog that has eye contact bites sometimes.
Right, exactly.
Right? They don't want to be looked at in the eyes.
Right.
It feels like it's domineering. And
Exactly.
people feel the same thing.
Exactly. Right. So I feel like wisdom comes in realizing, just as you said, that what works for me may not work for the next person. And being okay with that.
I keep coming back to one word that is really enthralling me, which is curiosity. And it just keeps coming up in my thinking daily. What is it to be in a conversation with you, whom I've never met, and not be prepared with questions, and not be preparing my next question while you're giving an answer to something else.
And just being present.
But to just
there,
say, be present and be curious. And learn. Be here to learn.
And I wish that all of us would remember that word, because I think if we allow ourselves to open our hearts to one another and to be present to learn, and not to think that we have more to teach, but that we have more to learn, not that we have the answers, but we have more questions. I think that if all of us could approach life that way and one another that way, what a wonderful place it would be, right?
Yeah, what a wonderful world.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something that might be problematic for you. I don't know. Probably not.
We'll find out.
Exactly. We'll approach it with curiosity. If you look at the Torah, the scroll, it's not originally a book. That was a translation, then another translation. And then it was an engineering of a text so that we could understand it. Because what we have in the scrolls in the synagogue ark are 5 books of Moses without the beginning or the end of a sentence marked. There's no punctuation.
Oh, that's really interesting.
There isn't a capital letter. There isn't a comma. There isn't a question mark. There isn't a period.
Wow.
So if you look at the original text before it was altered, before punctuation came into it, and before it was organized in a way that would make sense for us, which was done in a methodical way.
Yes, right.
But again, if we just look at the text as children with that kind of child's eye, that curiosity, we see something that demands curiosity because it's not fixed.
I love that.
It's asking you, to me at least, in every word and every statement, what is it saying? What can this mean?
I love
What else
that.
can this mean? How do I dig into this? How do I hold this and try in curiosity to make sense and make meaning?
Which is, I think, what God is asking each of us to do. God is inviting us in and saying, find out more. Ask more questions. Our teacher, Jesus, was incredible in doing exactly what you're saying the Torah is doing in its original form. Jesus told stories, these parables, and didn't tell them in a very black and white way. He refers to what was taught before, and then brings it to a modern metaphor, and then says, figure it out.
Yeah.
This is what I'm telling you. Ask more questions. And he did it so that people would ask more questions. He would say, this is what I'm offering you. Now, how are you going to apply that to your life? What are you going to do with this now? And so he leaves this. He didn't tell these parables and these stories to say, I'm going to give you this answer here is 1 + 2, and ta-da! He says, look into it more.
Yeah, struggle
with it, wrestle with it, try and figure this out. And then how does it apply to your life? So I love that. I love that too. I like that about what you're saying about these books of Moses in their pure and unadulterated form.
Right. As an art piece, looking at text as calligraphy on parchment, it's already telling us something. And I think one of the things it's saying is this is much larger than words can contain.
Absolutely. Because God is much larger than words can contain. God is much larger than it's mind-blowing to think that we could sit here and talk about God until the cows come in. And we still can't figure out the mystery of God, which is...
Or being human, by the way.
Absolutely.
Right? We could do this for 10 years every Monday.
That's right.
And we'll still come up with questions.
That's right.
Because we're still growing and struggling.
As we should.
I hope we don't have all the meaning. And we're struggling to find meaning and to make today meaningful.
Yes. Yeah.
With that,
I
want to thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. That thanks is all mine. This has just been a wonderful way to start the week.
Yeah, for me too.
You know, just being able to talk and to learn and to find meaning in even just this.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
Conversation.
Yeah, thank you for your generosity.
Boy, that time flew by.
I know. Well, this is for us the beginning of many, many conversations.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yes.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That wraps up this episode of The Meaning Mindset with Rabbi Ron. As always, I am humbled and honored to be your host, and I hope you'll subscribe and follow and leave positive reviews so we can continue offering you these hopefully meaningful and important conversations. Thank you. Our producer and editor is Jonah Lipaz. Our musical theme is composed by Amotz Plessner, and our logo, graphic design by Janice Rudnunski. Find us wherever you find your podcasts.